Growing up in a blended family taught me early on that love doesn't always come equally. My half-sister Sarah and I shared blood, a home, and parents who tried to make everything feel normal. But beneath every shared birthday cake and family photo, there was this quiet tension, an unspoken competition. Sarah never said it aloud, but I could feel it. Every time I achieved something, her smile came a second too late. Her compliments were always wrapped in backhanded tones. I thought I was imagining it until the day she snapped. Sarah believed the world owed her more because her father had passed. Everything, our home, our mother's love, even our family business, she saw as rightfully hers. I tried to connect with her, to bridge the gap between us. I offered my help with school, included her in my hobbies, even defended her when others didn't, but it was never enough. The resentment ran too deep, and over time, it stopped being subtle. It became a part of who she was. I remember one Christmas when I got a scholarship letter in the mail. My mom cried tears of joy. My stepdad lifted me in a hug. Sarah, she barely looked up from her phone. Later that night, I overheard her telling a friend, "She always has to be the favorite." That stung more than I expected. I wasn't trying to shine. I was just trying to survive, but I guess my light bothered her. From that moment on, I started walking on eggshells around her, afraid of stepping on another invisible line. Even as teenagers, it felt like she was always watching me, waiting for me to fail, to fall. And when I didn't, her envy only grew, sharper. She'd mock the clothes I designed, criticize my friends, and find ways to twist my achievements into arrogance. It was emotional manipulation masked as sisterly concern. I kept hoping it would pass, that maybe time or therapy or some big life change would fix it. But what I didn't realize back then was that Sarah didn't want healing. She wanted control. She cried in silence sometimes, locked in her room, ignoring everyone. And I used to worry about her, truly. I'd sit outside her door, whispering her name, hoping she'd talk. But when she finally emerged, her eyes were dry, and her tone was cold. She never wanted my comfort. She wanted my downfall. And the more I tried to extend kindness, the more she saw it as weakness. I was nothing to her, not really a sister, just an obstacle she needed to remove. There were moments, though, tiny flashes, where I thought maybe we were making progress. A shared laugh, a quiet car ride where she didn't roll her eyes. But those moments never lasted. They were bait, emotional crumbs to keep me hopeful. And I always fell for it. That's what hurt the most, that I kept believing she'd change. That if I just loved her harder, she'd stop seeing me as the enemy. But Sarah didn't want a sister. She wanted the life she thought was stolen from her. She resented our mother too, for marrying my father. And while she never said it outright, her actions screamed betrayal. She'd sabotage family gatherings, whisper lies that caused tension, and constantly test boundaries. Still, nobody believed her true motives. They saw her as misunderstood, troubled. I was the strong one, the resilient daughter who could handle anything. But no one ever asked if I was okay, if I was tired of fighting a silent war in my own home. There were days I wanted to scream, to tell everyone how cruel she could be when no one was watching. But I kept quiet, thinking my silence was my answer. I thought I was doing the right thing, that if I stayed kind, I wouldn't become like her, and maybe that was true. But the truth came out in whispers long before it ever exploded, and when it finally did, it was too late to stop what she'd already planned. Looking back, I wonder how much of our story was written in those early years, how much was inevitable. Maybe Sarah had already made up her mind about me before I ever had a chance. Maybe the rivalry wasn't something I could fix. It's hard accepting that some people don't want peace. They want power. And I didn't realize how far she'd go until the moment she tried to take everything from me, including him, because what she did next wasn't just personal. It was calculated, cold. She planned it all, and she thought I'd never fight back. But she had no idea what I'd planned. Leaving home felt like tearing off a bandage that had been stuck for years. The sting was real, but so was the relief. College became my escape, my sanctuary. I threw myself into fashion design with everything I had, sketching late into the night, sewing through tears, and presenting pieces while still healing old wounds. For the first time, I was seen for who I was, not compared to anyone. People noticed my creativity. Professors praised my work. I was finally becoming someone. Outside the shadow of betrayal, that's when I met Jason. He was in marketing. Smart, funny, grounded. He saw me in ways no one ever had. He didn't flinch at my stories of family dysfunction. In fact, he listened without judgment. It was easy with him. No competition, no games, just real connection. I remember thinking, maybe I can finally build something of my own, something stable. And for a while, I did. We were happy. He respected my dreams and made room for them. That felt rare. Our relationship grew naturally. He'd come to my showcases, help me carry mannequins, even sit through hours of me tweaking fabrics. I loved him for that. And I started believing I could have both, a career and a love that wouldn't shatter me. Meanwhile, Sarah and I barely spoke. Our conversations had dwindled into the occasional holiday text, usually one-sided. I didn't mind. My peace mattered more than pretending we were close. But part of me still wondered if she missed me, if maybe she'd changed. Then came the summer I brought Jason home to meet my family. Sarah acted different. At first, I couldn't quite place it. She was polite, even warm. She complimented my designs, laughed at Jason's jokes, and offered to help with dinner. My mom was stunned. "She's really maturing," she said, but I felt something off, a flicker in her smile, a tightness in her voice. I brushed it off. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe she was really trying. Jason, the optimist, thought she was sweet. "She just wants to reconnect," he said. I wanted to believe that. So when she asked if she could visit us in the city for a while, just to reset, get away from things, I said yes. Against my instincts, I said yes. I thought, maybe this is the breakthrough we've been waiting for. But what I didn't know then was she was watching, studying, waiting for the right moment to strike. She slid into our lives like a chameleon, helpful, charming, even affectionate. She'd make us breakfast, run errands, ask Jason about his work. At first, I was grateful. It felt like we were building a real bond. But slowly, she started inserting herself in ways that felt too close. She'd ask Jason to help her with tech stuff, lingered during conversations, and conveniently be around whenever we had a private moment. I started feeling displaced in my own home. There were subtle digs, too, disguised as jokes. "Wow, Jason, you're so patient with her," she'd say with a smirk. Or, "If you ever get tired of fashion talk, I'm always around." I'd laugh it off, but my stomach would twist. I wanted to confront her. But how do you accuse someone of crossing lines they claim they can't see? So I did what I always did. I kept the peace. I let her stay. I let her in. And she mistook my kindness for blindness. She cried in silence some nights, curled up on our couch. I remember covering her with a blanket, whispering, "You're safe here." That moment still haunts me, because even then, she was already unraveling everything I'd built. She planned it all. She saw my joy and wanted to steal it, not just because she envied it, but because she believed she deserved it more. And the worst part? Jason didn't see it coming either. When she finally left our apartment, she hugged me tighter than she ever had. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't know it then, but that was her goodbye. Not to me, but to any trace of decency. She wasn't done with us. Far from it. She was just getting started, and I had no idea the next time I saw her would be the moment everything shattered. Because sometimes, betrayal doesn't kick down the door. It slides in through the window wearing a smile, and I had just handed her the keys. It all seemed innocent at first. "I need a place to clear my head," Sarah said. I wanted to help, so I let her stay with us for a few weeks. Little did I know, that was the bait she'd use to destroy everything I loved. I thought maybe, finally, we could have some peace, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I had no idea that my trust would be the weapon she'd use against me. In the first few days, she seemed genuinely grateful. She cooked dinners, talked about therapy, even suggested that Jason and I start collaborating more on work. As a couple, I was touched by the change in her. Maybe, after all this time, she had finally grown up, realized the consequences of her past actions. I had no idea that behind that smile, she was plotting her next move, inching closer to everything I held dear. Jason and I were busy with work, but whenever we were home, Sarah was there, her presence almost magnetic, making her way into every corner of our lives. She wasn't intrusive, but somehow, subtly, she was becoming part of everything. She even started suggesting ideas for our future, as if she were a business consultant. Jason, being kind and always willing to help, showed interest in her proposals. He thought he was just being nice, just helping out his sister. I had no clue how easily she was worming her way into his trust. The more time went by, the more I felt like I was fading into the background. Not physically, but emotionally. She was getting closer to Jason in a way that made me uncomfortable. We had talked about it, Jason and I, but he always reassured me, "She just wants to help, babe. Relax." I tried to trust him, tried to believe that he wouldn't let himself be deceived. Deep down, I knew I was being naive. The truth was, Sarah was changing everything around me without me even realizing it. Then, she suggested we expand our family business, create a new product line. The idea sounded good on the surface, and I was tired of fighting against everything and everyone. So, I agreed. But the more we met to discuss it, the more I noticed how she was manipulating the situation, finding ways for her to become essential while I was being pushed aside. She was planting seeds where they didn't belong, growing herself into the center of it all. The worst part was when she started asking about our personal life. How was our relationship? Did Jason feel like his work was affecting our life at home? She kept asking about our future. Something inside me stirred, but I couldn't pinpoint what exactly felt off. Maybe it was just my insecurity, but something definitely wasn't right. I didn't trust her, but I couldn't prove why. I knew. There was a fine line between closeness and manipulation, but I kept trying to ignore the signs. Jason didn't see what I saw. He thought she was just being supportive, a sister who wanted to help. I, on the other hand, started feeling like she was inserting herself into places where she had no business. My house, my relationship, my future, everything was being slowly altered by her presence. What I didn't realize was that what seemed like genuine help would soon turn into a trap, one that she would set for both of us, to destroy the trust we had, to tear us apart from within. But I was blind. I was living in a bubble where I convinced myself that everyone was on the same team. Sarah was the black sheep trying to turn white, and I, foolishly, was letting her. Sarah had this way of appearing sweet and harmless, getting closer to Jason in ways I could no longer ignore, and somehow I knew that soon, the full control would be hers. I didn't know how, but I felt it. The clock was ticking, and I was wasting precious time, ignoring the signs that were as clear as day. I just didn't want to believe it was happening again. And while I was busy trying to figure out a solution, she was preparing to make her next move. The next move would be fatal, but the worst was yet to come. I didn't know it then, but Sarah was about to do something that would break me. She would finally drop the mask, and when she did, I wouldn't be able to turn back. It was supposed to be a quiet day, a day where I could come back and feel the warmth of home, to rest and recharge. But instead, when I walked through that door, everything changed. I had no warning, no sign that today would be the day everything would crumble. The silence in the house was heavy, almost suffocating. And then I heard it, the sound of laughter, of joy, of something I thought I had. I froze when I saw them. Sarah and Jason in the bedroom, tangled in a way that I couldn't even imagine. My heart dropped into my stomach. For a second, I thought I was seeing things, but no, there they were, completely oblivious to the fact that I had walked in. It was like time stopped for a moment, the room spinning as my world shattered. How could this happen? How could she do this to me? How could he? I thought he loved me. I thought I was everything to him. But no, apparently, I was nothing to him. Nothing but a placeholder, a name to go with the ring, a promise he never intended to keep. He never thought I would stay, did he? He thought I'd turn a blind eye, that I'd stay silent and let it all pass. But I wasn't going to do that. Not this time. Not after everything I had already sacrificed for him. The truth came out in a way that I never imagined. And when it did, it was as if my whole life had been built on a lie. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to say something, anything, that could make it all make sense. But instead, I stood there, paralyzed, unable to speak. The tears threatened to fall, but I held them back. My silence was my answer. I was done. I couldn't let him see how broken I was. Not this time. Not anymore. Because if he thought he could get away with this, if he thought I was just going to stand there and let him have his way with my heart, then he had another thing coming. Sarah, of course, didn't care. She was smug. She looked at me, almost like she was daring me to say something, to make her feel guilty. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. She exposed herself. She thought she was clever, thought she could take everything from me. But I would not be a victim. I wasn't just going to walk away quietly, like a coward. I wasn't the same person who had allowed myself to be manipulated before. What hurt the most, though, was how casually they treated everything. Jason looked at me like it was no big deal, like he didn't just rip my heart out, didn't just destroy everything we built together. I didn't even recognize him anymore. He begged me to stay. He begged me to forgive him. But how could I? How could I ever forgive someone who betrayed me so completely, so ruthlessly? I wanted revenge. I wanted him to feel the weight of his choices, to see how much he had broken me. But it wasn't just about him. It was about me. I was done being a doormat. I had spent years trying to fix things that were never mine to fix. And now that everything was exposed, I wasn't going to fix him anymore. No, I would show him the proof. I would show him the consequences of his actions, and I would do it in a way that he would never forget. And Sarah, well, she thought. She had won. She thought she could just take my place, steal everything I had worked for, but she had no idea what was coming for her. She had no idea how deep the betrayal cut, how much strength it would give me to finally rise above all of this. I wouldn't be broken. I wouldn't let her destroy me. This was just the beginning, and trust me, she never saw it coming. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart after the betrayal. The way Sarah casually brushed it all off, the way Jason kept begging for forgiveness, made me sick. But what hurt the most was how my family reacted. My parents, who had always been there, who had always supported me, disowned Sarah. They were furious, and for once, I wasn't the one who had to beg for understanding. I was the one who stood tall, with my heart in pieces, but a sense of dignity I never thought I'd have. It was a strange kind of relief, to see Sarah thrown out of the family, to know she wasn't going to get away with it, to know that the lies she'd spun around us, around me, were finally exposed. I wasn't going to let her make me feel guilty for this. I wasn't going to carry her shame anymore. She had chosen her path, and now she would have to live with it. Jason, though, he wasn't so easily thrown aside, as much as my parents were. Angry, as much as they wanted to throw him out too, I was the one who had to make the hardest decision, to cut him out of my life completely. It was like I was saying goodbye to my past, to a future I had built in my head. But that was the hardest part, wasn't it? Letting go of the dream, the future I thought I would have, the life I thought we would share. And then Sarah and Jason went on with their wedding. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced. They acted like everything was normal, like nothing had changed, like I hadn't been the one to plan it all. But now, they were the ones enjoying the celebration that should have been mine. They didn't know it, but this wasn't their victory, not in the least. It felt like they had stolen something from me, but they didn't realize the real cost. It wasn't until Jason's parents reached out to me that the gravity of everything really hit me. They were ashamed of what had happened. They knew what Sarah had done, and they wanted to make it right. They reimbursed me for everything, for the wedding, for the plans, for the life I thought I'd have. And while that gesture meant something, while it showed me that not everyone could be bought or swayed by Sarah's charm, it didn't erase the damage done. I could never look at Jason the same way again. He had shown me his true face. The person I thought I knew was a lie. The person I thought loved me was now someone I couldn't even recognize. He had betrayed me in a way I couldn't even put into words. It was like everything we had shared was just a lie, a story he told me to get what he wanted. And Sarah, she was no different. But what made me the most furious was how they acted like I was the one who was in the wrong, as if I was the one who needed to apologize, as if the entire mess was somehow my fault. But I knew better now. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story. The truth had already come out. And now, I was going to make sure it stayed out. I walked away from them all, from everything that reminded me of that life. I poured myself into my work, into everything I had always wanted to do, and for once, I felt free. It wasn't easy, of course. It never is, but it was necessary, and I was stronger for it. I wasn't going to let anyone treat me like I was less than I was. But even in my new life, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end of the story, not by a long shot. The past had a way of creeping back into your life when you least expected it. At some point, you have to make a choice. You can let the pain break you, or you can use it to rebuild yourself. I didn't choose the easy path, the one where I wallowed in my hurt and let it define me. Instead, I chose to fight back. Not with anger, but with the quiet strength of someone who's been knocked down and refuses to stay there. My heart was broken, yes, but my mind, that was still sharp, still clear, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I threw myself into the family business. I didn't just join it, I transformed it. My designs started turning heads. The company that had once been a symbol of tradition, something handed down from one generation to the next, was suddenly a beacon of innovation. My work wasn't just about clothes anymore. It was about power, independence, and showing the world that I wouldn't let anyone define me. Not even Sarah, not even Jason. I was finally in control of something, and it felt amazing. Every sketch, every fabric choice, every collection that came to life was a step towards reclaiming what was mine. It was like I was building a new version of myself, brick by brick, piece by piece. This was no longer about revenge, but about creating something that was uniquely mine, something I could stand on, something I could be proud of. But the thing about pain is that it always stays with you. It's like a shadow that never quite leaves, no matter how much light you bring into your life. Even as I was thriving, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah and Jason were still lurking in the background, waiting for their turn to come back into my life. The difference now, though, I was ready. They didn't have the power they once did. I had taken that power back. The more I pushed forward, the more I realized something. The world doesn't stop for you just because you've been hurt. People move on. They forget. And while I was using my pain to fuel my success, Sarah was living in the ruins of the life she had stolen from me. It was almost ironic, really. She thought she'd won. She thought she could take everything from me, and I'd just disappear. But she couldn't have been more wrong. I wasn't disappearing. I was rising. And then just when I thought I had it all figured out, something changed. The industry started to notice me. I wasn't just a designer anymore. I was a force. I was being asked to speak at conferences, to mentor younger designers, to be the face of a new wave of entrepreneurship. People were looking at me, listening to me, and seeing something they hadn't before. And with every opportunity that came my way, I realized something important. Success isn't just about the work you do, it's about who you become along the way. But there was one thing that still haunted me, one thing I couldn't shake. I kept thinking about Sarah. What was she doing? What was Jason doing? The truth was, I didn't know, and part of me didn't want to know. But there was a part of me, deep down, that couldn't help but wonder if they were really as happy as they tried to make me believe. I had already seen the cracks in their lives before. I wondered if they were still holding up. But for now, I wasn't going to focus on them. I wasn't going to waste another minute on people who had betrayed me. I had my eyes on the future. I was building something that would last, and that was all that mattered. The world wasn't going to wait for me to catch up. It was moving, and I was going to move with it. I had power, I had control, and nothing was going to take that away from me. It's funny how the universe has a way of bringing things full circle. Just when you think you've moved on from the past, it knocks on your door like a ghost you thought you had buried. That's exactly what happened when Sarah showed up, years after she'd ripped my world apart. I was no longer the same person. I had become someone stronger, someone who knew what it meant to truly rise from the ashes. But when she came back, angry and broken, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of resentment and pity. She didn't come back humble. No, Sarah came back with a sense of entitlement, as if the world owed her something. She demanded her share of the family business, as though it was rightfully hers to take. Her tone was sharp, like a person who'd never been held accountable for their actions. But what she didn't know was that the person standing in front of her wasn't the same Laura she had once known. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me again, not after everything. It wasn't just about the business, though. No, Sarah wanted more. She wanted the life she'd lost, the power she'd thrown away. The truth was, Sarah's life had fallen apart after she betrayed me. Jason had left her, just like she had done to me. And the man who had once adored her was now with someone else. Someone who wasn't tainted by her lies. She had no one, nothing, and the desperation in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She was grasping at whatever she could to get back to the top, but I wasn't going to be her stepping stone. I had worked too hard to get where I was, to let her waltz in and try to tear it all down. My company had grown, my reputation had flourished, and I wasn't going to let her destroy that. Not now, not ever. So when she tried to challenge me publicly, to make a scene in front of my employees and clients, I did what any woman who's been through hell would do. I stood my ground. The tension between us was palpable, like a bomb waiting to explode. She thought she could still control me, still make me second-guess myself. But she was wrong. The more she pushed, the more I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't just fighting for my business anymore. I was fighting for everything I had built, everything she had tried to take from me. This wasn't just a battle of wills. It was a battle for my life. Then came the moment that would change everything. In a public meeting, Sarah crossed the line. She had the nerve to try and sabotage one of my major deals, claiming that the business wasn't mine to lead, that it was always meant to be hers. But I wasn't having it. I exposed her for the fraud she was. She wasn't just stealing from me. She was trying to tear down everything I had fought for, and I wasn't about to let that happen. The thing about Sarah is that she had always believed she could get away with anything. She thought her family's name and her past mistakes would shield her from the consequences, but she couldn't have been more wrong. When I finally stood up to her, it wasn't just about setting boundaries. It was about showing her that the truth always comes out. It was about proving that I wasn't the naive girl she had once manipulated. In the end, her plans fell apart. The authorities got involved. She was escorted out of my company's event by the police, disgraced and humiliated. I knew that wasn't the end of her story, but I also knew it was the beginning of something much bigger for me, because as she was escorted out, I was standing taller than ever. This was my victory, my proof that I had taken my power back. And yet, as I watched her leave, I couldn't help but wonder, was she really gone for good? Or was this just another chapter in her endless cycle of betrayal? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. I was no longer afraid of what she could do. I had faced my worst fear and survived, and now I was stronger than ever. There comes a point when enough is enough. You've given someone a chance. You've tried to be patient, and you've even made excuses for them. But when they start pushing boundaries, when they start to cross lines that should never be crossed, you have to take a stand. That's where I found myself after Sarah's public disruption. I had tried to handle things with grace, but the universe had other plans. It was clear now that I needed to protect everything I had worked so hard for, and that meant setting legal boundaries that would protect me from Sarah's chaos. It wasn't just about protecting my business anymore. It was about protecting my peace of mind, my future, and my sanity. I had already lost so much to betrayal, to the lies she had spun, and I wasn't about to lose more. Sarah's behavior was escalating fast. First, it was the public disruption. Then came the threats. She was relentless, convinced that she could take what she wanted without any consequences. But she didn't understand something important. I had learned to fight for what was mine. The first warning came when Sarah tried to break into one of my properties. It was a shocking moment, one that made my heart race. I never thought I'd have to worry about security like that, but here I was. Sarah had crossed the line. She wasn't just a disgraced sister anymore. She was a threat, and I knew it was. Time to get the law involved. I couldn't just let her walk all over me any longer. She had already taken so much. Now she was trying to take even more. I remember the night it all happened. Police cars outside my office, flashing lights in the dark. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I never wanted to get to this point. But what other choice did I have? If I didn't protect myself now, what would stop her from destroying everything I had built? Nothing. That was the answer. So I took action. I filed for a restraining order, and I made sure that everyone knew just how serious the situation had become. The hardest part was knowing that Sarah wouldn't stop there. She didn't care about the law. She didn't care about boundaries. To her, it was all a game, one she thought she could win. But I wasn't playing by her rules anymore. I was playing by my own. I wasn't going to let her terrorize me or my life any longer. The woman who had once stood silently in the background, watching as she tore apart my world, was no longer the person I saw in the mirror. I was different, stronger, wiser. As time went on, Sarah's behavior became even more erratic. There were rumors of more break-ins, more desperate attempts to destroy me, but I wasn't the same person who had been broken by her before. I had faced my fears, faced the pain, and had come out on top. And I wasn't about to let her take that from me. Every time she tried something new, every time she thought she could intimidate me, I stood firm. The truth was, I didn't even recognize the woman Sarah had become. She was consumed by her bitterness, her jealousy, her need to take from others. But I had learned to protect what was mine, my business, my family, and most importantly, my peace. I wasn't going to let her ruin any more of my life. This was my fight, and I was ready for whatever came next. But even though I had won some battles, I knew the war wasn't over, not by a long shot. Sarah was still out there, plotting her next move, and I was prepared for whatever chaos she would try to create. She might have thought she could destroy me, but she never understood one thing: what doesn't break you makes you stronger, and I was more determined than ever to prove that. Years passed. Time, as it always does, had its way of healing wounds, but not erasing the scars. I had built a life, a successful business, and found my peace in the quiet, small victories that came with reclaiming what was mine. But just when I thought the worst was behind me, Sarah came crashing back into my life. And this time, it wasn't just her. The bitterness and hatred that had been brewing in her for years followed her like a storm cloud. She showed up unexpectedly one morning, standing at the door of my office like she owned the place. I couldn't believe it. After everything, after all the pain, the betrayal, the lies, she thought she could just waltz back in like nothing had happened, like she hadn't ripped apart my entire world and expected me to sit back and smile. It was as if she had learned nothing. It took everything in me not to slam the door in her face, but I knew that would be too easy, too simple. Sarah was never just about making things right. She wanted power, control, and something to prove. And what she was asking for this time was even more audacious than before. She wanted her share of the family business. She had been disinherited, humiliated, and left to crumble on her own. But that wasn't enough. She wanted a piece of what I had built, everything I had fought for. I'll never forget her words as she stood there, demanding what she felt entitled to. "I'm your sister," she said. "I deserve a share of what's mine." The audacity. The nerve. Did she really believe she could just demand what she had no claim to? Did she really think I would give her anything after all the damage she had caused? No way. She had no idea what she was walking into. My heart didn't even skip a beat when I refused her. I could feel her anger radiating from her, the desperation in her voice. But I had been through too much to let her manipulate me again. I had learned to trust my instincts, and everything inside me screamed to keep her at arm's length. No more second chances. No more betrayal. I wasn't going to let her worm her way back into my life, not when I had worked so hard to make it mine. She didn't take the rejection well, far from it. Sarah's rage was palpable. It was like watching a person who had lost everything and couldn't accept it. But here's the thing, when you burn all your bridges and lose everyone who cares about you, you don't get to show up asking for favors. You don't get to waltz back into someone else's life and demand what they've built from the ground up. And that's exactly what Sarah was trying to do. As expected, she didn't leave quietly. The drama escalated, as it always did with Sarah. She went public, telling anyone who would listen that I was stealing what was rightfully hers. She spread rumors about me, trying to drag my name through the mud. She was doing everything she could to get attention, to make me look like the villain in her story. But nothing she said could change the truth. She had burned every bridge, and now she was desperate to burn mine down too. I was prepared for it. I'd been prepared for it ever since she first betrayed me, but this time I wasn't going to let her get away with it. There was no way I was going to let her tear apart everything I had worked so hard for. The more she tried to ruin me, the more I doubled down on protecting myself and everything I had built. Her schemes were falling apart, one by one, and it was only a matter of time before she found herself in an even worse situation. But it wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about Sarah's very soul. She had been consumed by bitterness for so long that she didn't know how to live without it, and that was her downfall. It was hard to watch, but there was nothing I could do to fix her. No matter how many chances I gave her, no matter how many times I let her back in, Sarah was always going to be the same person. The person who betrayed me, the person who thought she could take what wasn't hers. By now, it was clear Sarah wasn't going to stop. Her bitterness, her jealousy, it all fed into this unrelenting rage that pushed her further and further into a dangerous path. She was no longer the sister I once knew. She had transformed into someone I barely recognized. The girl who had once been my closest friend, the one I used to laugh with and share secrets with, had become a stranger to me, and that stranger was becoming more erratic by the day. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It wasn't about getting her share or even trying to ruin my life. Sarah had taken things to a level where I feared for my own safety. It started with subtle attempts to sabotage me, sending anonymous messages to clients, making phone calls behind my back, trying to pit people against me. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just a phase, a tantrum she'd eventually get over. But no, this wasn't going away. Then, it escalated. I came home one evening to find my office had been broken into. Nothing valuable had been taken, but it was clear she was sending a message. It felt like a violation, something far worse than the betrayal. She wasn't just trying to destroy my career. She was trying to invade my life, to push me to the edge, to make me feel powerless. But if there was one thing I wasn't going to do, it was let her take my power. The police were called, of course. A restraining order was filed, and yet that wasn't enough to stop her. Sarah wasn't deterred by the legal boundaries I had set. She was consumed by this need to have control over me, over my life. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about breaking me. And as much as it hurt, as much as I wanted to let her back in, I knew I couldn't. I couldn't go back to that place of vulnerability where she had so easily stolen everything from me. I had worked too hard to get to where I was, but the law wasn't always the solution. Sometimes it felt like a band-aid on a wound that needed real healing. I had learned that the hard way. Every time Sarah stepped further into my life, I had to step further into protecting myself. I couldn't allow her to destroy me again. She had done enough damage. Now it was time for me to stand my ground, for good. No more second chances. No more being her emotional punching bag. I had learned that the only way to protect myself was to put up walls she couldn't tear down. There were moments when I doubted myself. Moments when I thought maybe I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. Maybe I was wrong to shut her out completely. But then I would remember what she had done to me, to my fiancé, to my family, and I knew that this was the only way forward, the only way to reclaim what was mine. This wasn't about hate. It wasn't about revenge. It was about self-preservation. It was about not letting her destroy me any more than she already had. At one point, she even resorted to something more extreme. A few weeks after the break-in, Sarah attempted arson. She set fire to a part of my business property in the middle of the night. When the fire department arrived, the damage was contained, but the message was loud and clear. She was willing to go to any lengths to hurt me. She didn't care about the consequences anymore, and I was left once again picking up the pieces. But the fire wasn't just literal, it was symbolic. It represented everything Sarah had become, a destructive force, fueled by rage, jealousy, and pride. She was out of control, and as much as I hated it, as much as I longed for things to go back to how they used to be, I knew I couldn't save her. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The police arrested her, of course. It wasn't just the arson, it was the years of harassment, the restraining orders, the violations. Sarah's actions had caught up with her in the worst possible way. And as I stood there, watching her being led away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel this strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt relief that it was finally over, but another part of me, something deeper, something that was still healing, felt a heavy sadness. This was the sister I had once loved, and now she was nothing more than a cautionary tale. But as hard as it was to admit, it was over. There was no going back, no fixing what had been broken, no way to rewrite the story that had already been written. And in the end, I knew it had to be this way. Sometimes, the hardest thing you'll ever have to do is walk away from someone you once loved. But that's what growth is. It's about understanding when to let go, even when it hurts the most.